There's a guy right back here.
It's Dave.
Oh, it's Dave. Okay. I can't see.
Thanks for the Twitter plug. You tell my follower kind of lot.
Excellent.
I wanted to just follow up on the journalism comment. You said there were two, you thought it was going to split into two pieces. Investigative journalism, which needs to be funded. Excellent. And what was the other part? It was grassroots journalism?
Yeah, and I think 2 is probably the wrong number. It probably splinters into lots of things, but the 2 that I'm watching are investigative journalism, and then the bottom is the netroots and the blogosphere interacting with what remains of mainstream media over time. And I don't think mainstream media goes away by any means, but I think that it winds up being symbiotically related to everything else that we do and pay attention to, which then, in effect, becomes one large watchdog sitting over it. Mika may have...
yeah, well, you know, I'm thinking of there was a story in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, is this on, talking about how young people get news now. They don't have the daily news habit, you know, that we grew up with, which is you check the news at least once a day, you buy a newspaper, or you watch TV. They don't have it. And the most interesting comment was from a college student who said, if there's something important in the news, it will find me. My friends will tell me about it. And that was really interesting to me because it suggested that this person felt like if it really is important, my network will bring it to my attention. And I trust my network more than all these other sources of information that are propped up by money or corporate control or whatever those things may be. And so I think journalism in that way is changing. I'd add one other element to this, which, just building on what Jerry said, which is the data is out there, and not only is it persistent, but the tools for sifting it and discovering and spreading important data have become immensely powerful. And if anything, what does this mean for politics? I think it means that, you know, for example, the people, since we're next to Capitol Hill, I'll use this example, the people who are complaining about their personal financial disclosure statements being on the web are kind of, you know, the barn door is open, folks. I mean, you can't stop this. If it was required to be made public, it's going to get on the web. And you know, if you put information there that you didn't want people to know, then the problem is with the, you know, the information that was required to be put out. If it's interesting, people will spread it, and it'll come to public light.
Great. Right there. Go ahead. Could you...
Right to the mic.
Oh, thanks. Just a quick question for Jerry. What was the name of the book that you talked about?
Yeah, Here Comes Everybody. The
author?
The author is Clay Shirky, S-H-I-R-K-Y. Just published like a month ago.
I would just add to that, as also I'd recommend the book. It's a really good also explanation of what you really mean by social media and social networking in the broadest sense. It's essentially, it's a very, very clear and accessible way to understand a much deeper shift going into social media, basically, as opposed to traditional media. There's one up here. If you could just maybe mention your name and if you want to, your organization, if you're part of something. Or.
Sam Bleacher, no affiliation. Mika, you made a comment about campaigns investing in the networks as opposed to investing in lists. Now, what do you mean by investing? What exactly are campaigns doing?
Sure.
I mean, I understand that there's a lot of networking that people do spontaneously.
Right.
And you were talking about that, about the Edwards campaign. You're checking in on them. But how did the Obama campaign invest in you?
Well,
let me ask another part of it, because I think it's another question we need to look at. Obama's campaign has been fantastically successful at all this, and we talk about it, and we hear about it every 30 seconds up here. What about campaigns that tried to do the same thing and did not succeed? Was it because they didn't do it right, or because they don't have the content, or what's the difference?
Well, I would actually argue, I mean, if we just use the presidential cycle as a test bed, okay, which it inevitably is, there are advantages there that don't apply to lower level races. There's all this free attention. People actually get themselves off their couches and care about who's going to be the next president in a way that's very different than who their next congressman is going to be. Though the scale, if you're operating in a congressional district and you can create, and your member puts themselves up on Facebook and they have 500 friends who are local in that district, that's pretty significant. 500 people network together in a congressional district is a very powerful force. So two things. The Obama campaign obviously built on things that were done in the Dean campaign. They actually, you can trace the DNA of Obama, My Barack Obama, his social network platform, straight back to the Dean campaign. It was a site called Dean Space, which then the people who built that created a firm called Blue State Digital. Blue State Digital built the same platform for a group out in Colorado called Progress Now. Progress Now, by the way, has 300,000 active members in the state on its social network hub, which is 1 out of 10 registered voters. Progress Now, Blue State Digital sold the same platform to the DNC. It's called Party Builder. And if you look at Party Builder and you look at My Barack Obama, they're basically the same tool set. This, by the way, is not an expensive platform. If you go to Blue State Digital and say, how much does it cost? They'll say $20,000 or $30,000, maybe a little bit more to customize it. So it makes sense, by the way, for the party organs to be buying these tools and then giving them to state, local folks, not that you have to go get your own. Tracy would, I'm sure, point out that it isn't just that you have a platform, but that you work it, right? And that means going to where people already are. The Obama campaign had a group on Facebook called Million Strong for Barack, which was a self-organized group started by a college student that took off like a rocket. But then the Obama campaign went to them and said, we've got to move these people off of Facebook and onto our platform. There are limitations with Facebook's group tools. That was the biggest reason. And they also wanted to, put their arms around their network. But just to give you two examples of campaigns, I think the Edwards campaign lasted longer in this cycle, in part because of their investment in network building, and I would say the Huckabee campaign on the Republican side, as well as the Paul campaign. Huckabee made fantastic use of support from grassroots bloggers. There were two kids, 18 and 19-year-old kids, who created something called Huck's Army on his behalf that had 20,000 members. And I would argue that his longevity in the race was also a function of his campaign's willingness to experiment and in some ways build and ride the support that you can get from a network that kept him in longer than, say, Giuliani, who ran the classic front runner, big money, all hat, no cattle. There was nothing there underneath it. And we're watching McCain right now, and to add to Peter's point, there is almost no organic social media being created on behalf of John McCain. If you look at the affiliation that we're seeing go to the candidates through big social networking sites like Facebook or MySpace, he is at 1/10 the level of what the Democratic field has. They go into the fall with a huge disadvantage, and I think they won't be able to catch up.
But some polls would have him running relatively close to either Democratic candidate.
At the
What's
moment,
deal?
polls are measures of name recognition. I think what the web is an early indicator of intensity of support. The reason why we're still spending money on television is that you still have to reach low information voters. There's still a lot of them, people who don't have the time or inclination to pay close attention. But I would argue that the reason to invest a lot on this sort of online, offline, we like to use the word offline activity, is there may be somewhere between 10 to 20 million political activists in the United States, people who are intensely involved. They're the kind of people who write letters to the editor, who donate money to campaigns, who organize events, go to rallies, whatever. They happen to be very influential on their peers, and they correlate very closely with the people who are not just going online to get information, but going online to create and share information. The Pew Internet studies suggest somewhere around 15 million people in 2006 not only went online to get political information, but created or shared, those are these people track very closely to the influencers, the activists. So, you know, if the idea here is how do you organize for power, how do you organize to win campaigns, you actually build on the people who are already most active. And I think the easiest way to find them is through all the stuff we're talking about.
Can I just
Yeah,
add
why don't
to
you
that?
should add to that, I think.
You know, I think that one thing that kind of gets lost in the mix when you're talking about the success of the Obama campaign is that, you know, it's not just about what the campaign is doing. I mean, above all of this, you can't argue that they have an incredible product to work with. They have a compelling, attractive, young candidate that is able to very easily relate to the demographic that's online, which is, you know, on one hand, you know, very young, the Facebook kind of MySpace, YouTube generation, but on the other hand, that kind of like high information, progressive, you know, well-educated, wealthier person, which is what surveys tell us is the demographic of a blog readership. You know, tends to have graduated college, make over $80,000 a year, possibly higher education. You know, in the 45 to 55 range is the highest, you know, number of blog readers. So I think that they have like a little bit of a built-in demographic advantage that people tend to, you know, overlook because they're attributing all the fabulousness of all, you know, all the online tools. And I think it's you need to take that kind of with a grain of salt and look at not only, you know, what's there, but also the work that they've put into it. What they've done that is brilliant and an incredible foresight when you see ahead, see ahead on their part is that they invested in building their own social network. They invested in building their email list. The money that they've put online in advertisements, I don't know if it's just me, if I'm just hyper targeted by them, but everywhere I go on the internet, I see an ad for Barack Obama. Every website, all over the place. And you know, they sent emails early on that weren't just give me money, give me money, give me money, but asked their supporters to do things that made them feel like they were part of the process. Write a letter to our volunteers in Iowa so they know that you people in Florida are pulling for them to win. This kind of feel-good community building was incredibly important in these early stages of the campaign, especially, you know, when you look back and when we see how you know, Hillary Clinton was just gonna get it. It was done. Why are the rest of us even running? Because obviously she's going to win. But they didn't care about that, and they knew that their supporters didn't believe that, and they leveraged that power. You know, the Clinton campaign has been incredibly successful online when you look at the way that they've used the internet, blogs, and kind of their online resources to manipulate the media in their favor. It may not seem so evident today or this week, but you know, when we had 8 candidates in a debate, Hillary's campaign was controlling what the pundits were saying before the debate was even over. Their use of their fact check hub, which put basically all of their research online and made it publicly accessible. So it wasn't just, you know, Phil Singer sending off an Oppo document to the Politico or, you know, the Washington Post. It was out there for everybody to see. It became, even though it was their document, they put it together, somehow by putting it online and having a URL that you can link to, all of a sudden it's credible and it's a source. And so I think that both campaigns have had tremendous successes in using the online space. They've just done it in very different ways.
I think we got changed for time for one comment here. There's a woman here in the front. I'm sorry, there are going to be many other opportunities to interact here, but before lunch. No, here, there's a woman up here in the front I was thinking. Sorry.
Thank you, Janet Olazak. I am a former candidate, and I had the experience, I live in Fairfax, of using the van, which is now going to be, or maybe we're the last in Virginia, to utilize a national program. The van, as opposed to the Republican voter vault, has a voter file that candidates always need access to. How does the information that you're providing today, for those of us who haven't really embraced it as fully as we need to, how does that interact for Democratic campaigns in a way that networking can become the informational, to fill the information gap that the van clearly has.
Well, I think I've used the van, and thank you for running. I think actually one of my friends may have worked for you, because I got Facebook messages about you. But you know, part of the problem is that, you know, the Democratic Party, is still catching up on the data. It's one thing that I think that the Republicans had when it comes to the voter data ahead of us. And the problem is that we have these great databases for voters now that are kind of clean, and we know that they work. But then we have an entirely separate database for fundraising and an entirely separate database that's managing our email list. What we need to get to is a database that lets all of those databases talk to each other. You know, at a higher level, at the presidential level, you can take your voter database and you can match it to your email address. You can pay for the data and the work that it takes to make those things work together. But at the smaller level, for congressional races, it's kind of a hurdle that we just haven't, I think, got to yet as a party.
Could I? I was just going to say one thing. Could you get Vijay? Do you want to comment on this? We're actually going to have a whole breakout session on basically database and micro-targeting, and I think it's just worth. Vijay is one of our speakers later, and he's literally with Catalyst in this exact space. Could you just give him the phone, and then we can also get a comment here. He'll be right after lunch.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Vijay Ravindran, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Catalyst, and have a plug my 2:30 talk, which actually goes into a lot of detail as to how the voter file is being taken to another level from where it was in 2004. And in particular, it really touches on what you're talking about, which is building the bus that can be used to integrate across all the different silos that are out there. And so I don't know whether, Pete, do you want to spend more time than that here? Or?
Well, let's go. I did want to just say we've got really key person to talk about. If you want to make a comment, that's fine too. We're just, do you anything that specifically to the question, basically?
Well, I think the big thing where we've lagged behind is on data collection. And so, you know, these campaigns, and we've worked with both of the major presidentials, not as much with the Edwards campaign last year. And I think it's still, we're scratching the surface in bringing all the different data together and then being able to then bring it back out to the masses in a way that can be used properly. And so that's the big gap that exists. And the Republicans, because they're so homogenous in how they actually use the tools that they do have, even if they're less powerful and less diverse, have really gotten disciplined about capturing that information for many years. And so that's one of the gaps that we're trying to close. But I think the van is actually, what the DNC has done with distributing the vans out is a great first step, because not only is it giving data out, but it's also creating a standardized way for data to come back in that can be then repurposed back out. And I think the next step is what Tracy's referring to. So.
Okay. Last comment did you want to make
really,
on this question? Go
really
ahead.
briefly on the same question. I understand the need and the frustration to try to integrate the databases and get sort of more unification. That makes sense to me. I wanted to talk about the bottom-up part of it, where there's, in some sense, really light integration that works really beautifully. So I've installed a little Facebook application called Twitter Sync. Whenever I put something on Twitter, it automatically cascades over and becomes my Facebook status also. And so each of my networks starts to sort of trickle together in different ways. This has turned into 5 or 6 stories I could tell of really interesting incidents that information came back to me because it had this rippling effect across networks. Second comment is, I follow Obama on Twitter and a couple other things. If any one of these candidates actually called out one of the people who's trying to talk to them and addressed them specifically, I think that would have a transformative, magical effect here, because so far they're just using it as Obama is about to go give a campaign speech in North Carolina. It's just the same old message stream coming out. They're not connecting to anybody, and they don't need to connect to everybody, but connecting once or twice or 3 times turns it into sort of a little lottery. It's a little bit like, pardon the Home Shopping Network, pardon the analogy here, but on Home Shopping Network, you know, you could be on TV, and that could be your 15 minutes of fame, and nobody will be friendlier to you than the host on Home Shopping, trust me, right? And then the third little comment here is that all these top-down ways of aggregating a big list and sending out action notices and trying to figure out what will move whom, in particular, you know, bourbon drinkers tend to vote this way and like this issue, right? This is all about inference, and you have to collect a lot of data, and your data better be clean, and you're working really hard, and that will get better and better. But the other side of it is just about action and passion and connecting into what people are trying to get done together. And nobody's really figured out how to do that really well yet. And there's this enormous wide open field right there at almost no cost. It's all about doing the right things.
Thank you. Thanks for the panel here. And what we're going to do is break for grab lunch and go through the buffet and then come back here because we're going to have Joe Trippi up for the lunch thing. But thank you to the speakers here. Thanks very much.